Welcome back, computer science students. This is another video in our advanced classes series, and you may say, what are we doing not looking at code? Come on, Professor Matfeld. We're going to dive into a rule in our code talking about exceptions. We're talking about student organizations. And so this is in reference to the Rule 3 about student organizations on our Elon page. So student organizations must welcome any Elon student in good academic and social standing as members. That is a general rule across the board. However, there are some types of clubs that have exceptions to this. So for example, if you're a sports club, then you might be like a men's soccer team or a women's soccer team. And so if you are a club sports type, you're accepted from that rule. In that you can require that your members be male or female to meet the requirements of your club playing competitively in leagues. Greeks, fraternities and sororities, right? You might have gender restrictions there. And then honors type, you might have restrictions on GPA. So certain types of clubs can set certain requirements that allow only specific membership to happen. And there are other reasons to have membership requirements as well. But that's part of the reason why we define these club types, is so that we can make sure we fulfill specific exceptions for specific clubs. So you have to be a specific type of club to allow for, the exception to the rule that you allow anyone in good academic standing here at Elon to join your club. So let's talk about how we can use a static method. And again, the big difference here is going to be, how do you call the method? And do you need an object to use it? So if we wanted to find out whether a certain type of club has an exception or not, we shouldn't have to create an object. This should be something that is determinable or able to be determined even if we have not created a club, right? We should be able to determine it just by looking it up. It's a rule for all clubs. Therefore, it makes sense to make the method to determine if you are static or not static. So if you're accepted, this is a static method. The isAccepted method should be static because it is a method or a rule that applies to all clubs, not to a specific club. And so that's why we make it static. And so let's look at a little snippet of code I have here and talk about it for a second and talk about why this is useful or what we can do with this. This is also tying in a little bit of array review. So at the very bottom of our code, we're going to have a print line, and we're going to create an integer array called test types. So these are a list of, maybe I wanted to test whether government types were accepted or Greek types were accepted. I could add as many organization types as I would like, but we could do that. So create this integer array test types, and it has two values. One is government, one is Greek. We're going to loop through our integer array for int I equals 0, I less than test types.length, I plus plus, right? So loop through 0 when I is 0 or 1, or if we add more, loop through the whole array. And now we're going to use a Boolean, so a true or false. And so we're going to get a true or false value based on whether the organization class says that the test type at index I is accepted, has an exception to the rule that you accept all students. So ACCEPT versus EXCEPT. All this accepted confusion is part of the human language, and English is amazing. But as we dive in, so organization dot is accepted. So I'm in my tester class. That means I'm not in the organization class. If I were in the organization class, I could just type is accepted, right? But now that we're outside the class, normally we'd have to create an object and use the object dot is accepted, right? If we look up, if we look up here, this is calling the getID method on a student. So we do student1.getID, where student1 is an object. But down here, we're calling the isAccepted method without creating an object. We're just using organization.isAccepted. And so this is how you call static methods. Once you decide that a method applies to all organizations, and therefore it is a static method, well, now when you want to call it outside of your class, you type the class name .isAccepted. Remember, static means belongs to the class. So organization.isAccepted allows us to check if any type of organization is accepted. So I'm going to check government type and then Greek type. So the result is, does this type of group have an exception? Government type organizations do not. They must accept any student in good academic standing. So therefore, when I print this out, we'll see that government type is accepted, true. And then we'll see Greek type is accepted, false. And if we scroll down, if I run my code, because I just uncommented this, we'll see 300 is accepted, right? And 300, we'd have to go verify here. Yep, 300 is government type, so that is not accepted, does not have an exception to the rule. The Greek type, though, does have an exception to the rule. Greek organizations can put requirements on which types of students can join, and for them it would be based on gender, so sorority, fraternity thing. So this is exceptions. So then we can look down. Hopefully this makes sense. Organization.is accepted, where this is a method that belongs to the class, so use the class name to call it. This pattern will show up. I can guarantee you it will be quizzed on or tested on at some point. So make sure you're familiar. If something is static, use the class name dot method name or class name dot variable name. But that is how you would reference it. That's one of the key parts about static, is how do you use it once you define it. Why do you define it? How do you define it? How do you use it once you define it? Those are the three key points here. And so that's done. It's great. The last example, though, I wanted to print out some bad design. So we have down at the bottom here, the very last thing, we talk about using this as accepted method. Instead of using something like organization.government type or organization.academic type or organization.club sports type, instead of using these nice definitions that we've created, we're just typing the number in directly. So 100, 200. If you do, it will work. So academic type clubs do not have an exception. Club sports clubs or club sports organizations do. So false for academic, true for club sports. But these two lines of code, lines 98 and 99, are examples of bad design. Because if someone else were to look at my code later and they see organization.is accepted and they see the number 100, there is no meaning tied to that. There's no reason why they would say 100 is accepted false. What does that even mean? But if we do organization.academic type, then future people who look at my code will now be able to go in there and see, okay, so I want to see if there's an exception for academic type organizations. Okay, so now I know what you're checking for. And this is like a little, this is just, it's a lot more typing, but it's a lot more clear, and it's a way to organize our code better, right? That's what all this stuff we've been talking about so far is about, is organizing code better. Making it more clear to future programmers, to us, what our code is doing, and be able to share it with other people so they can read it and understand it. So organization.club sports type would be the proper way to write this last line. So if we ever have static definitions for variables, I expect you, and other programmers would expect you, to use the variable name, not the definition, not the actual value. You should never have to know what the value is. These are kind of internal hidden codes that we can use to do a little bit easier, like math or comparisons or whatever. But the variable name is the key. This is the public part, the part that is visible to other people. So again, good use of public, good use of static because it belongs to the class, and good use of final because I shouldn't be able to change academic type or club sports type. I shouldn't be able to change these definitions anywhere else. They should be defined once right here and never changed again. So that's what final allows us to do. And so I think this has hopefully been a helpful explanation for how static works. It's one of the trickier topics in classes. And it's one of the areas where students can mess it up. When you start using static without knowing exactly what static is doing, it can cause very, very hard to solve problems, or hard to figure out problems. with your code and very significant problems with your code. So be cautious about it and make sure you understand when and how you should use static, and how to define static variables, how to define static methods using the keyword static, that it means they belong to a class, not to an object, and then how to actually call or reference variables or methods once they are declared as static. So we're going to have some examples on this for a lab, we're going to have a lab that lets you work on creating a static class and calling things in a static way. So please make sure you take advantage of that, and if you have any questions, please let me know. See you guys next time.